All right, everybody out there in the land of Jew curiosity. I hope you can hear me right now because I am broadcasting live on a very important topic to me, and that is what to do if you are on a Jewish journey, if you are converting to Judaism, or if you are Jewish but you're returning to it, you're trying on different practices, you are taking a new path for you. But the people in your life whom you love and who love you aren't on that path with you. And sometimes that can create friction, that can create questions, that can create distance. And this is one of the things that I hear about all the time from my students who are on a Jewish journey for the first time or the first time in a while. And there's friction in their family, in their circle of friends, or they're worried that there will be friction in their family and circle of friends. And because this has been expressed so often, I decided to do a video about it. And not just a video, but this will be another live studio recording of the Jew Curious Show podcast. How this works, we're going to have a conversation right here live. If you are with me live, I already see people chiming in. Some of my favorite peeps, Kay from SoCal and Teresa from Cyprus. We are bi-coastal. Cyprus has a coast. It's an island, so it has several, or maybe just one goes all the way around. We are on the west coast. We are in Cyprus, right next door to Eretz Yisrael. And so we've got people jumping in and saying hi to each other. That's fantastic. That's my favorite thing about these live shows is not just that I get to answer your questions, but people get to talk to each other in this learning community. If you are learning with me for the first time in this format, know that it is totally cool if there's some chit chat in the back of the room. I'm not one of those teachers that shushes everybody. I love for people who learn with me to learn with each other, but also socialize, build a community. Feel free to go ahead and do that. I see Vanessa is in the house from Germany. We now have 3 countries represented in this live chat. So how this works, this live studio audience thing is we're talking live on YouTube right now. That may seem obvious to you, tautologically so, but we're going to talk about a particular topic today. I would love it if you would jump into the chat, give me a high five, give me a shout out. I see a wave to Kay from Teresa. Let me know where you're coming from because I love to see how far this circle can spread. It's not about numbers, it's not about distance, but it still blows me away that we are able to connect from far points of the globe, multiple time zones in these crazy days of daylight savings time. And I love to see that. So let me know where you're coming in from. Let me know what questions you have. That's really important to a Q&A is that there be lots of Q's, as the case may be. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about this topic today. I'm going to share some things that I want to share based on my personal experience, based on interactions that I've had with students of mine, based on some learnings from the Jewish tradition. And then I'll open it up at various times for questions from the live studio audience. And then the recording of this session will go into the Jew Curious Show podcast. So a couple of days or a couple of weeks down the road, in your podcast listening rotation, you may hear this come back. So what I love about the Q&A is that people bring their questions live. I answer them live, but they're not the only ones getting the answer. Anybody watching this video can get an answer to the same question. And anybody listening to the podcast can get an answer to the same question. And I want to encourage you to ask whatever questions you have, because if you have that question, I guarantee you that somebody else has that question as well. So not only are you participating in this, or not only are you building out this holy community of learning that we're putting together, but you are doing a service to other Jew-curious people just like you by raising this question that they may have, but maybe don't have the vocabulary or the chutzpah to ask it. So by asking questions, you're doing not just me a favor, but you're doing everybody out there a favor, and you're helping to teach. So I really appreciate that. I see Aaron is in from Florida, Alexandria from New York, New York. This is why I like to do these kind of 9-ish. I'm hoping to catch some people in New York on their lunch hour. I hear there are Jewish people in New York and some Jew-curious people as well. So thanks for joining us. Let's see. I see Budrod, too, back from Columbus, y'all. So great to see you. I was invited to my first Purim celebration. What kind of costumes can I wear, Rabbi John? That's an excellent question. You can wear just about whatever you want. I'll say, depending on your congregation, it maybe have some air of modesty to it. Don't wear something. I don't know why I'm going down this road. Just when I think of Halloween costumes and Purim costumes and things like that, some people get a little bit risque. That's okay to a certain extent at Purim, but pretty much anything you want to wear is fine. Like, it shouldn't be something anti-Semitic. I'll say that. I won't say anything. There's some costumes that denigrate people and things like that. But whatever costume you want to come up with, that is fine. Purim is a time of frivolity, of humor, of creativity. I have seen some amazing I've seen some amazing Purim costumes out there. Sometimes people like to dress as characters of the Purim story. A couple of things I saw on my Facebook feed, a local congregation at a Purim carnival, and there were some children who dressed like the elderly, let's say. They put on gray wigs and had canes and walkers and put some lines on their face with makeup and stuff like that. Part of the, I'll say, zeitgeist, if I could use a German word there, of Purim is to do the opposite, is to flip things, is to make things topsy-turvy. So whatever, often whatever you portray on the outside most of the time, go to the opposite extreme in Purim. It's common for, going back centuries, for men to dress like women and for women to dress like men, for example, and just sort of citing that as opposites day, if you will. People who are, rabbis will dress like something very not rabbinic. So whatever whatever you normally portray, think about what the opposite of that is, and what would it be like to try that on for the day? This is getting very Rabbis Without Borders, Rabbi Brad Hirschfield, of seeing the opposite point of view. But it's a time of testing out identities. And what's interesting, and I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a Freudian psychoanalyst, often when we reveal what we think is our opposite, maybe that reveals something about our true nature as well. People say often about Purim costumes and other costume occasions, when we put on masks, what we're actually doing is removing the mask that we wear all the time. So this is a little bit off topic. So I'm actually intentionally going to do some, at least one live session on Purim next week. But I realize people are buying their costumes and getting prepared already. So I'll get into it just a little bit right now. So pick something that is weird, pick something that you like, pick something that maybe is an identity you've been wanting to try on temporarily, and try that out. I mean, as long as it's not denigrating anybody or, let's say, extremely immodest for the purposes of being in a holy community. Other than that, I'll say game on. You do you. So let's see. This BDCMD says, I want to go as a Jedi. Is that okay? I love this question. Totally. Go as a Jedi. Let's say, I don't know if the basis of the question is, okay, is Jedi a religion, and do I want to dress as an adherent of another religion? If you think Jedi is a religion, you do you, and I'm sure some people follow it, that people follow Star Wars religiously. I wouldn't be too worried about dressing up as a character from a fictional story at all. That's totally okay. You don't have to be Mordecai or Esther or Haman to participate. If you wanted to dress as a high priest of Baal or something that Eliyahu Hanavi would have had a problem with, it's a question for the local community. But Jedi, I think, is totally legit. I think that'd be great. I was wearing a Jedi t-shirt before I came on this podcast. I don't wear all my Jedi t-shirts on this podcast video necessarily, but again, I'm a big fan of the Star Wars canon in addition to the Jewish canon. So we've got some new faces. We've got some repeat offenders here. So really happy to see everybody here to learn about this topic. Again, I'm bringing this topic because it's sort of in my FAQ. It's sort of in, I did a survey of watchers of my channel, listeners to the podcast, specifically people who are converting to Judaism, but not just for them, and ask, what are some of your biggest fears? And what are some of your biggest frustrations on this journey? And one of the things that came up was, how do I negotiate that relationship with my family who may not be on the same path with me, or friends who may not be on the same path with me? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So thank you, everybody, for coming to this. We've made Minion officially. We got 10 people watching, so we'll count that as quorum and get going here in a second. Again, this is a live studio recording of a podcast, so from time to time I'll say podcasty things like I'll put on my podcast announcer voice. See how that goes? Excuse me. Red leather, yellow leather, unique New York, she sells seashells by the seashore. That's my Ron Burgundy impersonation. And maybe I'll go as Ron Burgundy. That's an excellent idea. I was going to go as Bigtan, the assassin from the Esther narrative, but maybe I'll put on a mustache and I'll be a Bigtan Burgundy. We'll try that out. So in a second, I'm going to introduce the show, start with my normal promo, and then I'll say, we'll talk about that right after this bass, which is a cue for music. I don't have any music yet, but that could be aspirational for one of next week's broadcasts. And then we'll get into it. And then at the end, I'll stop and say what I normally say to close out a podcast, but feel free to hang out. I'll hang out for as long as people have questions about this topic. I was really, I'll say, moved by the response to yesterday's broadcast about conversion and what they call imposter syndrome. We had a lot of great people weighing in with a lot of great ideas and questions yesterday. But then after the broadcast was over, like 100 more people saw it. And the numbers just keep ticking up. Again, it's not about the numbers, it's about the learning. But it shows me that people are really responding to these topics, so I'm going to keep doing them. So that's enough about that, about 12 minutes of intro blather. Let's get into the show. Okay, so it's going to go a little something like this. And again, because this is a live recording of something that will be edited, sometimes I'll make mistakes, sometimes I'll repeat myself. Just know that that's part of the process. So let's see, how do we want to start this show? Probably with the word hero. I'm going to make an assumption. If you are listening to this podcast, you are probably Jew curious. There's something that's drawing you to the Jewish religion, to the Jewish people, to the traditions and the wisdom that we have to share, the access to happiness and community that we have to share. You may be on the path to converting to Judaism, or you may be already Jewish and you've decided to take that, let's say, more seriously, or try on things about your Jewishness that you haven't tried on before. In any case, you are in a place of quest. You are in a place of journey, and you are moving from one place to another. And you may have people in your life, your family, your friends, people you care about and who care about you, who are not on this journey with you. Today, we are going to address one of the primary concerns that many of my students have, and that is, how do I take my Jewish journey when my family is not joining me on that journey, when my friends aren't necessarily with me and supportive on that path? And we're going to get into that. I'm going to share my personal story and the stories of I'm going to share my personal story, how I have negotiated with this, and answer questions from the live studio audience right after this bass. All right, that's the cue for the music. We've got AM, what up from Idaho, or excuse me, not Idaho, sorry, different I-state, Iowa. Thank you for being here. And let's get back into it. We do a little segment on gratitude here because I believe it's important to start everything with gratitude on the Jew Curious show. And here we go. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Joey Weissenberg and the Hadar Ensemble. Thank you very much to the live studio audience that we have here on YouTube. Thank you very much to the live studio audience that we have here on YouTube. And most of all, thank you, Hero, for tuning in once more to the Jew Curious Show podcast. If you've been around for a while, if you've been listening to this show, you know that I have an occasionally irreverent take on topics that I take very seriously. So if I get a little jokey, don't get too put off. But you already know that if you're listening a second time. If you are not listening for a second time, if this is your first time listening to the Jew Curious show, my best advice to you is to subscribe to this podcast. You might want to give it a chance, give it a little bit of a listen, but just in case, I want to make sure that we don't lose each other. Go ahead and get on your smartphone, get on your podcast listening device, and somehow indicate that you would like to subscribe to this show. Click a button, tap a picture of a button, and that way you will have access to the full archive of everything that we've talked about in over 30 episodes at this point. And when new episodes come out, you will automatically download them to your device. You don't have to do any more work. Just hit subscribe and listen when you feel like it. And that's okay. And once you've accomplished that, settle in, sit back, put your phone out of reach, maybe in your glove compartment, in your cup holder, in your apron pocket as you're washing the dishes. I'm not shy. I wear an apron when I wash the dishes. I like to keep my clothes dry underneath. So, that's just a good policy, I think. But put your phone aside so that you can settle in for this great conversation that I sincerely hope we're about to have on the topic of friends and family not necessarily being along for the ride as you take your Jewish journey. Once more, this is a live studio recording of the Jew Curious Show podcast, episode number 34. And as such, it's time to go to the chat. Let's see who's with us today. We have Kay from Southern California. We have Teresa from Cyprus. We have Vanessa from Germany. And Kay is throwing in a Guten Tag to Vanessa. It might be a Guten Abend at this point. That's my semester of college German coming out. We've got Woolen Bullet is back from Nova Scotia. Thank you so much. I know that maybe wool is popular in Nova Scotia. We've got Marihara from Sweden. I don't know that I've seen you before, Marihara. So if I have, please accept my apology. If I haven't, welcome to the show for the first time. We're seeing Bud Rod too from Columbus, Georgia. All right. I'm not just faking that. I grew up in East Texas and West Virginia. I have the whole range of Southern accents in my vocabulary. We see Alexandria from New York. We see Aaron from Florida. We see BDC MD. I don't know if you're from Maryland or if you are a physician, in fact. So in either case, Mazel Tov. I love doctors. I love Maryland. Lived there for several years myself, among other places. AM says, what up from Iowa? Let's see. We have a question already. I was told the Jews cannot eat in non-Jewish homes. I was sad to hear this. I have a different opinion about that, and maybe we'll share that later in the show today or on a different podcast about kashrut. Let's see. As Teresa says, for sure there are many views on this. Depends on who you are, where you're from, etc. So thank you, everybody, for chiming in the chat. I hope we're going to get lots of good questions to answers, lots of Q's to A today. I'd be delighted about that. But I want to jump into this topic. And how I got here was I reached out to people who listen to this podcast, who watch on my YouTube channel. I've got some surveys in place and things like that. And one of the things I ask is, what frustrates you most along your Jewish journey, or what are your greatest fears? What's standing in the way from you just totally releving? Little mush mouth today. What's standing in the way from you just totally reveling in your Jewish experience? What are some things that cause you stress, cause you anxiety, and how can I help? And one of the answers that has emerged many times is people on a Jewish journey, whether that is someone who is converting, whether that is someone who is coming back to their heritage from a long time away and taking on more mitzvot, taking on more Jewish observances, and that might differ from how their family does their Jewish, how that family does their Jewish. And so that causes tension, that causes stress. And even if you haven't experienced this yet, you may have anxiety about what it will be like when you do experience this. Some people start this journey in a very private way, saying, I've gleaned some insights from Judaism. I've experienced wisdom. I've found things that have helped me. I haven't really jumped in yet. Maybe I haven't talked to a rabbi or taken a class, but this seems like something that's calling to me, and I'm nervous to tell my family, or I'm nervous to tell my friends. I'm wondering how they are going to react. I'm worried that they are going to judge me, and I'm worried that that's going to cause damage to our relationship. And I'll say you are right to worry, not because this has a bad outcome all the time, but you're right to worry about the quality of your relationships. I think one thing that Judaism gives us is a guide toward personal relationships, a guide toward coming together as a community, as a family, as friends, and how important those relationships and how constructive and beneficial those relationships are in our lives, and we should work to maintain them. But what happens if seeking Jewish wisdom, if trying Jewish rituals and traditions gets in the way of those relationships? And that's what I want to talk about today. I would be super excited if people in the chat want to ask what questions they have, or just do me a favor, and if you have had this fear or this anxiety, just type into the chat, yes. If this has ever happened to you, if you've ever had this fear, if you're willing, if you are courageous, type into the chat, yes. And just so I can see that I'm not just making this stuff up. In the meantime, we've got Brian coming in from Australia. That's awesome to see. Saying shalom to everyone. BDCMD is coming from Pikesville, the heart of the Baltimore Jewish community. I am familiar. I actually graduated from Towson State myself. Actually, it's now Towson University. It was Towson State when I was there. So that's what my diploma says, I think. We've got Aaron, we've got somebody chiming in saying, I'm worried about having a non-Jewish partner, and that will cause many problems with my own Jewish exploration and journey, looking to hear some advice about this. So thank you so much for raising this. We've got some yeses coming in from all over the world, literally. We've got somebody saying, my folks are evangelical Christians. What do I tell them? And so I think the best way to approach this, and they say when you're talking about controversial subjects, you should use I statements. And again, this podcast is not about me. It's about the Jew-curious people. But I think the best thing I could do is share with you some of my story and some particular things that happened around this topic, what that has taught me, and how I now give that to my students to teach how maybe you should negotiate with your families. But first, I'm going to tell a story about a rabbi from a couple hundred years ago. Let's say, I think about 100. I need to look up his bio. It's been a while, but this is a rabbi of the Hasidic tradition, and his name was Rabbi Menachem Mendel, and he was from the town of Kotsk. And Kotsk is a city that is, I'll say, is sometimes Poland. Right? The way the borders work or have worked historically between Russia and Poland and the Soviet sphere of influence and different wars and things like that, the borders kind of gone back and forth. And this town of Kotsk has been in a number of different countries, but I think it's in Poland now. I think it's called something else in Polish, but I only know what it is in Yiddish, and that is Kotsk. So Rebbe Menachem Mendel of Kotsk was a Hasidic rabbi of some repute. He built a following, he had students, and he was sort of known as the Kotsker Rebbe, like he was the rabbi of the town of Kotsk. And in addition to his reputation for scholarship and wisdom, he had a reputation as being something of a stern figure. He did not suffer fools. He spoke very brusquely at times. This is not the Lashon Hara, just kind of sharing some color here to explain how he might have reacted in this situation. So this guy comes to Rebbe Menachem Mendel, and he says, Rabbi, my son won't study Torah. I tell my son every day to study Torah. And, stop me if you've heard this one. Don't stop me, but it's legit, because this is my podcast, y'all. But I tell this story all the time. And so the Kotsker Rebbe, in typical fashion, boxed him on the ear. Just give him a little clap on the side of the head. And he says, Tepish, which is Yiddish for fool. Of course your son won't study Torah, because you told him to study Torah. right? And so what do you think is going to happen? You're going to tell your son to study Torah, and then he's going to tell his son to study Torah, right? That's how family traditions start. You tell your son to do something, he may or may not do it, but he will learn that the proper thing for a father to do is to tell his son to study. And so he's going to tell his son to study, your grandson. And then your grandson is going to tell his son, your great-grandson, to study Torah. And the only tradition that you have built is one of fathers telling their sons to study Torah. I see this play out sometimes where parents in congregations went to Hebrew school or went to religious studies school, confirmation class, whatever. Maybe they didn't pay attention. Maybe they didn't get a lot out of it. Maybe they did. But in any case, they tell their kids, you're going to Hebrew school because I went to Hebrew school. And I don't care if you hate it because I hated it. And that's our family tradition, is going to Hebrew school and hating it. That is not something we invented. This has been around at least as long as the Kotzker Rebbe. And so the man, is kind of rubbing his ear and he says, well, what do I do then? And the Kotzker Rebbe says, I'm glad you asked. Here's what you do. You should study Torah. If you study Torah, and do it where like your son can see you, but you study Torah, and don't tell him, hey, come over here, study with me. Just you spend some time studying Torah, and really look serious about it. And keep doing it, every day, every other day, whatever fits into your schedule. I like every day. And when your son sees you studying Torah, he's going to want to study too. And by the way, I say sons. This is gender neutral. This is just how the story goes. This goes for mothers and daughters, or fathers and daughters, mothers and sons, the whole nine. This is a much more egalitarian age, Baruch Hashem. But the Kotzker Rebbe says, if your son sees you studying Torah, he is going to want to study too, right? And if he sees you loving it, somehow, involuntarily, perhaps, he will love it too. And then his son will see him studying, and he will study. And then instead of building up generations of a family who told each other to study but never studied, you will build up generations of a family that actually studies. That's how you get your son to study Torah. And more than that, that's how you build a legacy. And I tell this story. This is one of my favorite stories of all of the different Hasidic tales that you can find in Martin Buber's Tales of the Hasidim, or hear your rabbi telling you about. That's part of how the Hasidic tradition works, and the Kabbalistic also tradition works, is telling stories that you inherit from people that elucidate values in Jewish life. And the reason I share this with you is the principle or the value of doing things that you love and letting other people see that. Now, if I may, let me tell my own story. So I came to Judaism in my 20s, and I converted when I was about 25 years old. It'll be 19 years this summer. And, after a year of study, I decided that this was right for me, and I was welcomed in with open arms. I had a great rabbi sponsoring me, had great rabbis in the Beit Din, have had great teachers and mentors, rabbis and not rabbis, ever since. And a few years in, I was having an argument with my family. And if my family's watching this, I don't know, I don't know that if my family's ever watching this, but if my family's watching this, please forgive me for telling this story. But let me switch to you statements to make it more comfortable. Have you ever had an argument with your family? If you've had an argument with your family, type yes into the chat. If you're shy about that, you don't have to. But I'm going to guess that at least one of two of you have had an argument with your family. And if you've had an argument with your family ever, you have probably at one point or another have what I call the kitchen sink fight. Right? That is the argument that goes on for a long time, and everything gets talked about, including the kitchen sink. Everything that anybody has ever been mad about, every slight, every miscommunication, everything that anybody has ever been upset about gets thrown into this fight. And this happened, and I don't know that families invented this, but families certainly have perfected this. So maybe it's not just me. I don't know. But I'm having a kitchen sink fight with my parents, and I'm not like a surly teenager. This is me as like a 30-some-year-old at this point. And so we were talking about something else. And then it came out, by the way, John, we weren't crazy about it when you converted to Judaism. I said, what? It's been like, 8 or 10 years at this point, and this is the first time you've ever said anything about this. And my parents had that feeling for several years and had never shared it with me. And so this may not be your experience. Your friends and family may hear about this and immediately say, that's a dumb idea. That's not you. Are you worried about hell? That sort of thing. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But my parents kind of held on to that and then let me know what they thought at that moment. And I'm only telling you that because the story has a different ending, let's say. So I remembered that. I held on to that. I had this new awareness of my family's pain. And as a father now of kids ranging from, let's say, 6 to 23, through the different cycles of parenthood, just entering that season of learning how to parent to adults. So if anybody has any advice out there, I'd love to hear it. But what I realized in that moment, or maybe realized over time afterwards, is that the people who love you want you to love what they love. They want you to derive the same joy from the things that they derive joy from. Because if they love you, they want you to experience joy. They want you to experience meaning and connection and growth. And they want you to be safe, right? Above all, they want you to be safe and cared for, happy and supported. That's what love is wanting that for another person. And there's probably a lot of things that love is, but that's a big part of it in my book. So you can disagree with me if you want to, but I'm going to stick with this. What I realized was that my parents really just wanted me to love what they love and to be safe and secure in doing something that they felt safe and secure doing. Nevertheless, I was on this journey. I'd been Jewish for several years, and then fast forward a couple of years, I was on, I'll say, a different kind of journey that was changing careers. I was a financial analyst and a consultant, basically did math for a living for a number of years, decided I wanted something more, decided I wanted to connect to a cause greater than myself, to be of service. And long story short, landed on Rabbi. And in my particular denomination, the conservative movement or Masorti movement of Judaism, there's only 2 seminaries. There's one in New York, and there's one, let me take that back, in the U.S., which was the range of my options. There's one in New York, there's one in L.A. There's also a conservative yeshiva in Jerusalem, and the Machon Shechter, which also ordains rabbis. There is a new Masorti rabbinical school in Germany, which is dope if you really think about it. So there are a number of places, but my choices were New York and LA, and I was living in Minneapolis. And so I knew that being on this path, I was going to have to move. I was going to have to send out change of address stuff. I was going to have to tell my parents because they were going to be like, why are you moving to New York? Why are you moving to LA? And so I made a phone call, right? And I picked up the phone and I dialed my parents' number with that prior conversation in mind, knowing that this could be the last time I ever talk to my father and mother. They expressed very strong opinions about me becoming Jewish. They were going to hate this. I was going all in, right? And if they didn't like that, they were not going to like this. And so I called my dad and said, I wanted you to know we may be moving soon because I'm going to go to seminary to become a rabbi. This was about, 11 years ago at this point. And he said, that's wonderful. Wait till I tell your mother. Like, my mother was taking a nap. My parents are at an age where they've earned naps, let's say. So my mother was taking a nap, but my dad was just ebullient, just really over the moon, happy for me. And then I was totally shocked. I was taken aback, but I was grateful at that moment. And then I went and did something else, and I get a phone call, and it's from my mother. And my father had woken her up and told her about this. She calls me back and says, "Well, I just think that's so wonderful." And both my parents are from Texas, so the accent is legit. My mom was thrilled. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand what was going on from that prior conversation to this. But then what I learned and what I realized was they knew that I was looking for a career of greater meaning. They knew that despite their misgivings, I was serious about being Jewish, and they knew over time how much it had come to mean to me and how much it had legitimately improved my life, improved the quality of my relationships. It had even improved my relationship with them, because I believe Judaism taught me to take kibud av v'em, honoring your parents, more seriously than I had taken it before. And so over a period of time, I had shown them what I love and what difference it had made for me. And the point of all this, to go back to the Kotzker Rebbe, is if you want someone to love what you love, show them that you love it. Show them that it means something to you, right? Because again, from my prior learning, I know that my parents most of all wanted me to be safe and happy and on a good, productive path that gave me meaning and joy and growth and connection. And by showing them that Judaism had done that for me, I got their buy-in. I didn't convert them. They didn't become Jewish. I wasn't selling it to them. But that's when I realized that the people who love us most and care most about us, they do want us to love what they love so that we can be happy the way that they are happy. That was a profound realization for me. But when they see that you are achieving the same kind of happiness and meaning and joy and connection, the what is less important than how you are experiencing it. Because most of all, they love you more than they love their thing that they want you to love. And I'm going to asterisk this. Not everybody's going to have this experience. Not everybody's going to have a warm reception or a turnaround story like I had. But I wanted to share that insight with you. What I learned is that people who love us want us to love what they love so that we achieve the same meaning from what they have achieved in their thing. But more than that, they love us. And their care for us means more to them than that we care for their thing. All that is to say, if you are concerned about how your family or friends are reacting to your journey, or how you think they might react to your journey, my single best bit of advice is to love your journey. And it's not going to be easy, like learning how to be Jewish, learning how to do Jewish, learning just Jewish stuff. There's a lot to it, and it's not always fun. As one of my rabbis pointed out, there was an article about parenting called All Joy and No Fun, right? Sometimes it's hard, right? But ultimately it brings you joy. But let them see you doing your Jewish things and deriving meaning and joy from those things. And my prediction is, statistically speaking, it's not perfect, that they will say, okay, that's not for me, but it seems to be really working for you. And I'm grateful that you have something in your life that works for you. Once more, this is not a silver bullet. To go to another tradition of, werewolves or something. This is not a perfect fix. Not everybody will have this experience. People will have hard conversations with family members who just don't get it. And I believe, I want to give those family members credit. At base, they want you to be safe. They want you to be happy. And if, let's say, people have strong feelings that adhering to their religion is sort of the one way you were going to escape eternal damnation, to use an example, they're going to fight you, right? Not because they have to be right, but because they care about the career of your soul after life, after your death. And so those are some strong things to get in the way. But that's my best advice, is that if you are concerned that people don't appreciate the path that you're on, don't let that dissuade you. Don't hide what you are trying to do. Maybe you don't talk to them for a little while, or maybe you talk about other things when you're together, sort of agreed that this is a topic that we're not going to get into. We still love each other. We still care about each other. We're still going to get together for holidays, yours or theirs. But this is something we're going to put on the back burner until you can demonstrate to them that it has brought you joy in your life. And when they see that, if they love you, they will understand. That's been my personal experience. That's been the experience of many of the students that I've worked with who have had to deal with this hard issue. And so I wanted to pass it along to the Jew Curious Show audience in case that is helpful for somebody. If it helps one person out there, I say mission accomplished. And feel free either in your feedback to the show or feel free in your feedback in the chat right now to let me know if you think this is BS, if you're trying to maintain my clean lyrics sticker on this podcast, if you think that if you've had a completely opposite experience, I'd love to hear about that and see if we can work through it together. So with that, I'm going to take a little pause. I'm going to go into the chat and see what people are talking about. Go back to the very beginning, a very good place to start. We see our new friend Brian, U.S. expat, currently living in Australia. Longtime fan and lurker of your channel. Thank you for that. I highly encourage lurkers. Also, Brian says it's currently 3:45 a.m. down under. Sorry for that accent. I'm not making fun of you. I love Australian TV shows, and I've copped a few sayings. No worries. How you going? So it's 3:45. Still listening to the show. I want to say it's totally okay to be a lurker here. If you are lurking on the chat, if you are lurking in one of our communities, that's okay. I just say you can lurk as long as you lurk and learn. If you are not learning, don't bother lurking. But it's totally a legit way to learn from others as you are exploring your own journey. We've got Teresa saying shalom, Brian. We've got Alexandria. Congrats, Brian, on getting up at 3:45 to listen to the show. AM says, my folks are evangelical Christians. What do I tell them? I would just tell them. I would just be honest. I would say, this is a journey that I'm exploring. Chances are, I don't know that they will necessarily, I don't know you. I hope to, but chances are maybe this doesn't surprise them so much. If you're not participating in the activities that they're participating in, saying, I haven't found a path that's right for me yet. This seems to be a path that might be right for me, and I am exploring it, and I hope you'll respect me because you love me to let me explore this path. Ask me what questions you have, and answer those questions with honesty and sincerity. And I think that's the best way to broach those conversations. Let's see. I've got Budrod saying, I've attended several synagogues in town, love the shiur, but don't find it working for my young kids. They find Sunday church more welcoming. I'm not going to argue with you, Budrod, too. Depending on the congregation you go to, there may be less to do for kids there. And if you go on a Saturday morning, say, the services, depending on the denomination, can be 2 or 3 hours, which is harder to get kids through than 1 hour. I remember going to church as a youth, and I made it through the services primarily by drawing, right? I don't want to diminish the work of any faithful Christians, but I sat there and I would draw on the bulletin. And there was like a little pencil in the pocket for passing the plate. And I would take that pencil or borrow a pen from my dad, who was busily taking notes on the sermon because that was his jam. And I would draw things in the margins like Sergio Aragonés would in the margins of Mad magazines, because that was one of my heroes. And I would just draw, and I would think of other things to do. Sometimes there was Sunday school, sometimes there was youth services or whatnot. But I was distracted and bored, and that's part of childhood, is being distracted and bored, I think. And the fact is that synagogue services on a Saturday morning are much longer to get kids through. And so I get it, right? I would seek out, if you can, finding services or finding congregations that have more youth. Like when kids are with other kids, they are more engaged, they have a better time. I don't know if this is accessible where you are. Maybe it's something you go to by yourself for a while. That's an option as well. I know people who are converting and they're married and they have children and they haven't, their family hasn't necessarily joined them on this journey. Maybe that's me time, right? That's something that you do. And then you find ways to comfortably, safely, non-threateningly integrate your family into that experience. Maybe the kids don't want to go to the Saturday service, but a Purim carnival with costumes and pie throwing and games and things like that might be something better. Look for holiday celebrations. Look for things where other kids are doing it. And then when they see that there are other kids who are enjoying this path similar to what you were on, that's I think how you're going to engage them. And so God willing, you have something like that in your community. We've got a lot of yeses here. So obviously I'm not talking about something that I made up. Let's see. With kids and wife on a separate schedule, Sabbath is for soccer games and playgrounds, not resting at home. That's really tough. I think, even here in Southern California, Saturday soccer is a big deal. That's why a lot of congregations are challenged to have families with young kids, because those kids are playing soccer with their friends at school. And that's, I'm going to say that's a pickle. I'm not going to tell you, pull your kids out of soccer, for this thing that you want to do, because that's not going to make any friends. I had a student who was studying Shabbat with me. And he said that was hard because especially this particular person was divorced with teenage sons. And he would only get his kids on the weekends and like every other Thursday or whatever. And I'm not making fun. I had that in my life too, so I get it, right? And it was hard for him to observe the Sabbath when the one bit of time that he got to spend with his sons, his Sabbath observance was to shut down the PlayStation. And that was a very unpopular choice. And so in that case, I would say, okay, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Show them that, look, Dad is just kicking back today. And if you want to kick back today, you can kick back with Dad. If you have to go to your soccer game, go to your soccer game. And, but maybe you can carve out some time. I mean, soccer games don't last 25 hours. Right? They last for, an hour or two. It's been a while since I've been to soccer games, but say, okay, maybe you compromise at this point in your life and say, okay, there's the soccer games, but afterwards we're going to chill and play a board game as a family. Right? That's been my challenge with small kids, is how to keep them, and like kids sometimes hate Shabbat because it's like, I can't play on my computer. I can't play on my Kindle. I can't play on all the different things that I do. So we've gotten better at board games, right? And board games that I don't necessarily like playing, like Monopoly and Risk. Right, because there's all those little pieces to step on. If the kids want to do it, find something that they enjoy doing and doing it with them, and maybe stretch yourself a little bit. And again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, but find little ways to make that day different from other days in ways that they enjoy, and then they won't associate Shabbat with no and rules and boring. They will associate Shabbat with, this is the day that we play Settlers of Catan. Maybe that's just me in my house, but this is the day that we walk to the park and we play on the playground, right? We don't get to do that on other days. And so make it special in some way, and then they will begin associating that day with special things. That's how I've done it. That's how some people that I know have done it. Let me just take a look at this question. Drake is asking a bigger question that I may defer for another time. A question for you. Was there any one event experience that convinced you that becoming Jewish was right for you? When your family and friends ask you why you chose your path, how did you answer? And so I'll often start that answer with, well, I was an atheist. I was devoutly opposed to being a part of any organized religion based on my experience from my youth in the organized religions and experiences that I was exposed to. Didn't connect. And then when I found, and I hesitate to say it was one event. There is one event, but I'll get to that in a second. Over the course of study, I thought, wow, this works for me in ways that other religions that I had been exposed to didn't work for me. So much of my religious experience was about asking questions and getting answers that I wasn't satisfied with, and then ending the conversation there. Like, that's just how it is. Don't ask. We're not going to debate this. This is, you believe this thing or you're out, right? And that might have metaphysical, eternal consequences as well. And that wasn't satisfying for me. But then I got into a tradition where not only was argument encouraged, but it was canonized in the sense that, not maybe necessarily in the Tanakh, although there's some good arguments in the Tanakh as well, and that is canonized. Avraham argues with God. Moses argues with God, right? And so much of my prior religious experience had been about submission and subservience and not arguing and not asking questions, even though I was raised in a rigorously intellectual household of educators. My mom was a K through 12 school teacher. My father was an academic, and then even college president at one point. These were not ignorant, close-minded people. And so I was raised to debate and to ask questions. The religion that we were a part of, I didn't find that. or it didn't seem welcome. And then I found in Judaism that debate is encouraged. Ask questions about the faith, ask questions about our progress, or ask questions about our practices and rituals and traditions. And different rabbis' opinions will be presented on the page, right? And have been preserved since the time of the Mishnah, at least. And that's what I mean when I say that argument is not only encouraged, it is canonized. And as a recent guest, Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, put it, the sacralization of dissent, right? It is considered a holy act. And so if there was one thing about me that I took very seriously, it was my skeptical side of always debating and always asking questions and trying to find the truth through dialogue. And that's what attracted me. And what I worried about was, okay, I love the debate, can't hang with the whole God business. And then it was presented to me that you didn't necessarily have to hang with the whole God business as God is often taught to juvenile humans. And then I said, okay, well, then I can engage with this people that thinks the way that I think and celebrates skepticism, healthy skepticism, we'll say. And at that moment, I think that was the one moment when somebody made it clear to me that a particular image or set of beliefs about God did not prevent me from engaging with the people, engaging with the tradition, and getting the same joy that people get out of holidays and things like that. That was the moment when I decided, yes, I can do this. Right? I was in love with it, thought that there was a barrier, and then that barrier was lifted, and then that love was, let's say, requited. And then I think I've kind of taken it too far with the whole rabbi thing, but you be the judge. We got Higa Girl Steph is in the house. Thank you so much for coming back. So great to see new people and returning people as well. I hope that was helpful for you, Drake. Let's see, Marihara, do you have any tips for communicating with family members who are generally wary towards religion and possibly won't understand it? That's a great question. It's a different question than one we've talked about yet. I think so far we've talked about, let's say, families who have one tradition, families that say have one religious tradition and you are going to a different religious tradition. What's more and more common in America is families that have no religious tradition and are wary of people who do. I'll say when my current and final wife and I got together, my forever wife, we should probably take, this is live. That's, I don't know how, this is a little bit awkward for me. I've had 2 marriages in my life and both of them have been wonderful. And this current one I'm sticking with. I'll just say that. I'm going to edit this out of the podcast at some point. But when my wife and I were dating and I met her family, and they were asking me about me and things about me. And one thing they didn't like about me was that I was divorced and my father-in-law is a family law attorney. And he knew that comes with baggage and didn't want that for his little girl. But the other thing that wasn't entirely positive about this guy that my wife, my then girlfriend, was dating was that I was religious. Never had a problem with the fact that I was Jewish. Had a problem with the fact that I was religious and serious about it because of his own personal experience with religion that had really put him off and really been a negative thing in his life. And so that's true for a lot of families. Not calling out my father-in-law there. We're since good friends. I think we get along great. We love books. We talk about books. But people can be skeptical, because especially people are skeptical about what religion does to you and makes you like a follower and takes away agency. Talked about that in a podcast that's coming out here in a minute with Rabbi Elad Nehorai, that he was concerned when becoming religious that religion would take away his agency, meaning he would not be able to think for himself anymore. He has since discovered otherwise, even though he is on a very, what some would say, religious path. And so I think, again, the idea is to do what you love, show them that you love it, show them the benefits that accrue in your life from doing this thing. I'm more relaxed in general because I take Shabbat, right? I have more and better quality friendships because I invite people over for Shabbat and holidays. Making decisions about what I eat, for example, gives me the strength to make other decisions in my life. This is how I think of kashrut, like making small decisions about what I eat helps me make bigger decisions that might be hard for me if I didn't have practice in that kind of distinction and decision making, Right. And when these people see that their metrics, let's say perhaps their secular metrics of happiness and thriving are increasing in your life because of your religious practice, they may say like, look, I don't cotton to the religion, but I see that it's good for her, or I see that it's good for him. And so because I love that person, I'm going to respect that about them. And they may make jokes. They may be like, you're a Jewish religious person. That's not really what we do. But over time, they'll become more respectful, and their love for you will breed, let's say, acceptance, maybe at best tolerance, and then maybe acceptance, and then a real high regard. Maybe they don't join you on your path, but they have a regard for the path that you are on because of the great things that it's done for you. That's my best advice, is to do what you love, glean what you glean, let them see you enjoying it, let them see you benefit from it, and I think they'll come around. And you can just say, like, this is a path that I'm on. And this isn't just like academic textbook stuff. I've talked to, at this point, dozens of people on a Beit Din for conversion. And this is one of the questions that we ask is, have you told your family? Usually the answer is yes. Usually when I'm sponsoring somebody, I make sure they've talked to their family before they come to the Beit Din, if they have a relationship at all with their family. And we ask that question. And they say, like, by and large, I'll say 90 to 95% of the time, the outcome of that conversation, at least by the time somebody's gotten to the Beit Din, is positive. Very rarely, I've never, and again, this is just my sample size, I've never heard of somebody going to the Beit Din, us asking, how does your family feel? And the answer being, well, I've been totally alienated and disinherited. Nobody's talking to me anymore. I've never heard that happen. I'm sure it's happened. But in my experience with people converting, it's almost always, well, they don't love what I love, but they love me, and they see that it's good for me, and for that reason they are supportive, right? And many times I have got a conversion candidate in there in the Beit Din room, and their non-Jewish parent is sitting there with them in support. And I love to see that. And they're very happy by the end of it, just like what you have done for my daughter, what this faith, what this path has done for my son is all that I need. And so that's the advice I give based on my story and who I have worked with. Let's see. Let's jump back in. Rabbi John, thank you for welcoming me. This is Higa Girl Steph says, this is off topic, but I have had similar religious skepticism. How have you reconciled the problem of evil or an omnipotent and all-knowing God creating people that God knows will suffer greatly? I don't know how to cope with this, but I really want to believe again. I understand if this is too much to get into today, but do you have any resources that you can point me to, please? Thank you for asking this question. This is the hardest question, not just for me, but you've pointed to, I'll say, one of the top two hardest questions that any religion has to deal with. This is just my experience in my religious life and knowing other religious leaders and knowing a little bit about other religions. I always say the top two hardest questions that any religion has to answer for people, or that people ask to their religion or of their religion, is, why do good people suffer? And what happens after I die? And I've maybe addressed this in other forums, but I'll give you sort of a very brief answer, and then I'll at very least give you a good reference. My favorite reference for this is a recent book, the title escapes me, but a recent book by Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson, Artson. And I think the book is called The God of Becoming and Relationship. You can hear him and me talk about that on a very early episode of the Jew Curious Show. It's like episode 3 or 4 or 5. But go into the Jew Curious Show archives, look for, or go to RabbiJohnCarrier.com, search for Artson, and you will find that podcast episode. He gives a great answer in dialogue with me, and his book gives an even more in-depth answer. In essence, this theodicy is the technical term for it, but the problem of evil and why do good people suffer, and flip side, why do wicked people prosper, really challenges our sense of justice in the world. We think that good action should have good consequences, bad action should have bad consequences, because that seems fair, right? I'm not a scholar of John Rawls' theory of justice, but that's a piece of it is, justice has so much to do with our own sense of fairness in the world. And so it seems unfair when bad things happen to good people and vice versa. And so we go to religion and we say, hey, I thought you had this omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omnipresent, omniscient God, right? How can a God who is all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving, and all-just let unjust things happen to people whom that God loves when that God clearly knows what's going on and could clearly do something about it? I'm going to defer to that episode of the podcast. Look again for the Jew Curious Show interview with Rabbi Brad Artson, because he gives a much more cogent explanation of it than I do. In a nutshell, he says that this idea of an omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, and omnijust, I don't know if that's a word, God is not native to Judaism. That idea of the omnis, as he calls them, is something that Aristotle, I think I'm not a scholar of Aristotle, about 300-400 years before the Common Era, that is a description of God that Aristotle gave us and perhaps invented, because that's what made Aristotle's system of logic and physics and metaphysics work, right? That's an assumption about God, that God is omni, like all those things, because otherwise Aristotle's view of the universe doesn't make sense. However, that is not the same God that is presented in the Tanakh, in the Talmud, let's say. But, rabbis along the way have picked up some of those Aristotelian and Platonic and Neoplatonic ideals about God. And many rabbis believe in this, the omni stuff, but it doesn't work for everybody, because then you have problems like the Shoah. How did that happen? The Holocaust Shoah is another word for that. You have what I think is a harder problem to solve, and that is things like, fatal pediatric illnesses, right? I can kind of explain the Shoah in a logical way. I hate to say that because it was a horrible event, but I see that as, something that is a possible outcome of massive failure of human will and morality, right? God didn't do that to us. We did that to ourselves, and we let it happen for a long time until we stopped it, right? And that was the tikkun for that failure, the recompense for that failure. And so, that I can explain kind of. I don't love it, but I can explain. I can understand how that happened without God judging us somehow. There are rabbis who say that the Shoah was a judgment on us for leaving the path of true Judaism. And I think that is BS, and I think that is hostile to human intent and human will and human love. So I don't teach that. I'm just saying it so that in case you encounter that in the world, you won't be surprised. But the one thing that I can't explain is, how do little kids who deserve nothing bad to happen to them get sick in a context where some religions, including parts of our own, believe that illness comes from a judgment from God, that God desired that to happen. And I think that is, for me, an unhealthy way to approach life. Instead, I think God gave us two gifts when we were born. That is, an eternal soul made of the stuff of heaven and a body made of the stuff of earth, because the soul from heaven can't do mitzvot, right? Our souls can't help people. We need bodies for that. The problem with bodies is they're made out of stuff. They're made out of material. And as Rabbi Ed Feinstein teaches, stuff breaks. And sometimes that breakage is bad decisions that we make. Sometimes that breakage is little flaws in our genes or mutations or what have you that create cancer, that create genetic illnesses. That stuff happens to human beings because God decided to make us out of matter instead of pure spirit. And so the best thing that we can do in those moments is not blame God. I don't think God goes around giving people sickness, right? I think germs give us sickness. But I do think God teaches us to care for each other. I think God, like I like to put it, and again, there was a thread I shared in the podcast from my favorite Twitter thread of Rabbi Daniel Ruttenberg, who talks about this very important, pressing issue. But my take on it is God is not in the business of making us cry. life makes us cry. Physics, bad decisions, other people's bad decisions, those things make us cry. God is in the business of sitting down and crying with us, and teaching us to cry with each other. That's the God that I believe in. And again, not everybody agrees with me about this. There's a debate in the Talmud and Masechet Brachot, page 5, A and B side, I think, that gets into this to say, okay, there's one view from Judaism that God makes people suffer so that they can have that God makes people suffer so that they can have a greater reward in the world to come. And some people are very satisfied about this because it satisfies their sense of justice. And then when you turn the page over, there's a story about some rabbis testing this theory, where a rabbi gets sick and another rabbi comes to him and says, "Oh, I see you're suffering. Would you like to keep suffering so that you get a greater eternal reward?" And he says, "No, thank you. Could you take me to the doctor, please?" Right? So even within a single page of the Talmud, people have this debate as to, okay, what's the Jewish way? Well, there's one Jewish way to think about it, and there's another Jewish way that is totally unsatisfied to that, and people help each other instead of waiting for punishment or reward. So that is my thumbnail sketch of the two hardest questions. I didn't get much into afterlife, but certainly theodicy is a hard thing to wrestle with. I didn't want to dodge it. I will defer you once again to our podcast episode with Rabbi Artson, who gives a much better answer than I do. That's why I had him on the show. And also because he's cool to talk to. So thank you so much. Let's see what else is going on today. We've been talking for a little over an hour now. Wow, I got carried away. So we're gonna wrap up this episode. As we do, I'm gonna jump into my podcast voice again, and I'll close with my usual closing. Please feel free to stick around, ask what questions, keep chatting with each other. Kathy actually put the name of that book, God of Becoming and Relationship, The Dynamic Nature of Process Theology. It is the best layperson's explanation I've seen of what is a very complicated philosophical topic. So I highly encourage you to check that out. And maybe I'll throw a link to it in the show notes to this episode as well. For now, we're going to wrap things up. So feel free to stick around. Feel free to sign off if you need to. Really appreciate people spending this hour plus with me on this important topic of how to be on a Jewish journey when the people you love the most aren't necessarily sharing that journey with you. This is an important topic to my students. It's been an important topic in my life. So I wanted to share with you what I have learned in case it's helpful for you. But I'm going to close by saying, Hero, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Jew Curious Show, created in a live studio recording with shout-outs from the crowd, with shout-outs to the crowd. We've seen the range from Southern California to Florida to Germany to Australia to Cyprus and all points in between. Really appreciate the audience that we built for this show. Couldn't do it without you, heroes. So excited to have you here. This episode is number 34, so if you'd like to see additional resources like Rabbi Artson's book that we mentioned, please check out the show notes at jewcurious.show/episode 34. That's jewcurious.show/the word episode, the number 34. And finally, I want to ask a quick favor. If you have enjoyed this show and you are not already subscribed to this podcast, go ahead and click that button so that you will receive all future episodes on your podcast listening device. And if you'd like to let us know how we're doing, if you'd like to let us know that you have benefited from this show, please visit iTunes, find the Jew Curious Show, and leave us a review. Honest reviews only, not looking for shills out there necessarily. If you want to shill, but what I would love it is if you would go to iTunes, find where it says rate this podcast, give us the appropriate number of stars in your opinion, and I'd be super grateful if you would write a few words about how this show has helped you, whether you think this show is helpful. Let us know how we're doing. But not just that, when you give the show a rating, that tells iTunes who else might like the show, and that's how this show spreads and gets in front of other people who may benefit from this as well. And if you would do that, I would be, as we say in Texas, much obliged. Hero, thanks again for listening to the Jew Curious Show, and until next time, peace. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in with me. We've still got 13 people I can see watching on the podcast. So grateful for this Jew Curious community. I'm going to give you a little teaser with a little bit of hesitation. Tomorrow, we are talking about LGBT issues and Judaism. And I'll give a little bit of a caveat up front, and I'll say it again. I'm doing this show because a lot of people have been asking me lately about how gay people, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, asexual, what have you, how people who describe themselves this way are accepted in the Jewish community. I will say the answer is complicated. The answer is diverse. It is as diverse as Jewish communities and Jewish people are. And so I'm going to share with you what kind of the Jewish law is around this issue, how different communities have interpreted this law, with the caveat that this is not necessarily from personal experience. I am a cisgendered heterosexual male, which means I am privileged. It means I get away with a lot. I'm accepted in all sorts of communities. And so I haven't had the experience of bumping into communities that didn't accept me because of this. I do genuinely hope to get on the podcast very soon voices who can speak to this from experience. In the meantime, I feel it's my duty to answer the questions that I'm getting, and so that's why I'm doing this show tomorrow. So tune in tomorrow to the live broadcast. We're going to be doing it at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. Once again, bring what questions you have. I will bring what answers I can bring. We'll talk about different legal perspectives, where the different ideas about homosexuality come from. I'll give the best answers I can give from my perspective. So I would be delighted to have you tune in for that, to ask the questions that you have. If you have specific leaders or thought leaders or rabbis that you know of that you would like me to get on the show, please let me know, because I'll be reaching out to a bunch of folks very soon to come on the podcast. So thank you again for doing this learning with me. And for right now, I'm going to sign off because I've got to go jump in to teach another thing pretty soon. So thanks again, everybody. And until next time, peace.